Our favorite day of the week at yet another DC animated podcast is game night,
Although we usually play the Batman version of Monopoly,
where literally everything is owned by Bruce Wayne.
we also like jumping over to the Marvel Universe and playing Marvel Dice Throne.
Marvel Dice Throne is a fast and fun board game for all ages. Each player selects one of 8 heroes to face off in a head-to-head battle to see who earns the right to take the throne.
Gameplay involves strategically rolling a dice to activate special abilities, playing unique hero cards to manipulate results, and upgrading your hero board to power up your stats.
This is currently being crowdfunded on Kickstarter and will have Kickstarter exclusives.
So go there now to reserve your copy.
This is yet another
DC Animated Podcast. Welcome to yet another episode, yet another DC Animated Podcast. My name is Shamar Griffith, codename Comic Shams.
And I am Andrew Tejada, codename Arate.
Andrew and I have known each other since 1996.
That is the year the third Aladdin movie came out. I know that doesn't seem relevant.
But I'm not going to lie, that's my favorite Aladdin movie.
Oh, King of Thieves?
Yeah.
King of Thieves? I'm telling you, it's going to be relevant as soon as we get started. It's not clear why yet, but trust me, there's a reason.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out the connection, but for the main part, though, we in season 2, which means that we're talking about the one, the only, the greatest show that probably hit our TV screens in the 2000s, Static Shock.
Yes. We are tired of waiting for Jaden Smith to become Static Shock as he promised us years ago. And we are going to devote this season to covering Static Shock's original animated series run.
And this one is such a great run. There's so many people in it. In our episode here, we're going to be covering the first 4 episodes of the series in season 1 so far. So that's going to be episodes Shock to the System, Aftershock, The Breed, and Grounded. All of these have premiered in the year 2000. So on September 23rd, 2000, that's when we got introduced to Static Shock, including the voices of the series. And just because this time around, since it's a series, we're going to cut back a little bit on the list here because there's a lot of voice actors. So this time around, though, we will drop in the main show's cast, and they are Phil Lamar, who is Virgil Hawkins, a.k.a. Static, whose resume is longer than my entire existence on this planet. We have Jason Marsden. So between being Max from A Goofy Movie and now Kid Flash and Impulse and Young Justice, he was Richie Foley. While he was once the kid who was on a stoop and was afraid to leave his stoop, he is now Francis F. Stop Hotstreak, as we have Danny Cooksey here as Hotstreak in these first 4 episodes.
I think there's some way this could be canon. I think he left the stoop.
And they got superpowers?
Yeah. Got some highlights. I think it works.
Danica McKellar, you might know her as Wendy from the Wendy Years. She's now currently voicing Miss Martian in Young Justice. But right now in our series, she is voicing Frida, the love interest of our young Static here. We have Michelle Morgan, who was once Rosa Parks in the Boondocks. This was, I think, the funniest thing I saw. She is Virgil's sister, Sharon Hawkins. We have also another long list of resume titles here for Kevin Michael Richardson, who is voicing Static's dad, Robert Hawkins. And last but not least, we have some special guests here, as we have Bumper Robinson, who pretty much was like every teenage heartthrob in the 90s, as he's playing Derek Barnett, Destruct, in one of our episodes here. Thelma Hopkins, a.k.a. Aunt Rachel from Family Matters, is his mother, Mrs. Barnett. And finally, Andrew, this is my favorite one of all time. Kerrigan Mahan is voicing Edwin Alpha. And you might not know Kerrigan Mahan, but you might know either Jeb from VR Troopers or Goldar from the Zordon Saga of Power Rangers.
That is a deep cut, and I love it. I love this man's dedication to evil over the years.
This really was a throwback, and I enjoy it. My nostalgia is going crazy while watching these first 4 episodes. How about you?
Going into this, it's like it's double layers. It's the feeling of going back to those days of childhood cartoons and just all the 90s 2000s references.
Whew.
Oh man, there's just so much. It's a wave of nostalgia that hits.
Yeah, and we're going to jump into this show now with our first episode, Shock to the System, as we open up to the Warner Brothers logo. Bugs Bunny is on the side chewing his carrot. But then we get started on the hypest theme song I've ever heard in my entire life. There are no lyrics. There are no lyrics.
They don't need them. They don't need them.
But it really just does capture who Static is as a person. And it's just like, it was great to have this kind of theme song. It's basically a hype man just saying, here we go, here we go. So I love it. As we open up to a scene now of some criminals who are just, I don't know, stealing things.
They're stealing boxy TVs. This immediately, again, the nostalgia immediately hits because these are the boxiest, top of the line TVs you could have had in 2000.
Oh yeah, these are like 2K like TVs, like 2K HD TVs, if anything. I don't know if that was a thing, but that's
0K TV.
So as they're stealing some things, we have our narration from Static, who jumps into the scene. He turns on one of the TVs, uses some of his static electricity powers, as now the criminal's freaking out. So Static is, I love this entry already. Static is making some jokes. The swag is on point. Even at that moment when he does make a mistake and he gets caught from behind, he admits, like, you know, like, cut me some slack. It's only been 2 days.
Exactly. And I like the high-powered intro. And right away, here's where the Aladdin reference comes in. When Static flies in on his traditional manhole cover, some guy goes, "I don't care if it's Aladdin up there, shoot him."
All right, it's full circle.
It's full, as you can see. And right away, the series establishes how fun the action is going to be. At one point, one of the gangsters operates a forklift and tries to bury Static under boxes. Dude, go to your job and stop robbing things. Like, you're a trained forklift operator.
Static quickly locks them all up as, you know, he's showing off again, just like the extent of his powers. And now he's been saying that he's only been at this for 2 days. So we get a jump to a flashback of how he got his powers as he's in his bathroom. He's rapping in front of the mirror. He's got his electric razor going, trying to trim down the non-existent hairs on his chin. And I gotta say, man, this reminded me so much of being 15. I love it.
Oh my God. Yes, it captures it perfectly. He's just a normal kid. You can tell he's a little smarter than the average bear. And you find out pretty quickly that his mother is gone. They go into it a little bit later, but it's just his sister, him, and his dad. Mm. And he's trying just to get through the day, be the cool guy, wear his cap, rock that cap. He's rocking his red cap hard. And as soon as he gets to school, he's just trying to ask this girl Frida to homecoming. But Hot Streak, well, what's his real name? I just
Francis. Yes,
Francis.
Francis.
There we go. Freaking Francis comes up going like, "Ooh, Frida, you smell good." This creepy guy.
Right? Just instantly canceled, bro.
Just no. And Static tries to intervene, but unfortunately, Francis has been taking his Wheaties because he throws Virgil across the hallway with one hand.
Yo.
And that, before it looks like Virgil's going to get in trouble, another guy, Wade, shows up and he throws Francis with one hand. What are the bullies in the school eating?
I don't know. I also want to know, like, this can't be high school. No one should be this big in high school. Even animated.
They're huge.
So as Francis walks away, Wade starts talking to Virgil, tells him that, like, yo, if you keep doing this, you know, you gotta watch out for people like him. But also at the same time, it's like, I can't always just be there for you. So as Virgil's walking away, in the earlier scene, forgot to mention, we got introduced to Virgil's best friend, Richie. Richie's kind of like this cool kid, I will honestly say. He reminds me so much of Greg from Everybody Hates Chris, but like if Greg was like probably like 10 times cooler, maybe like a sneakerhead. I don't know. Like he just gave that vibe to me. So as they're walking away at the end of school, Richie automatically tells him that, yo, what she did was wild. She never tried to tangle up with Francis because you know how he is. As they're like saying their goodbyes, Virgil's walking alone back home. And at this moment, he sees Francis. I'll give him his street name now because he's on the street. He sees F-Stop post up at the lamppost as the rest of F-Stop's crew starts making their way towards him.
Yeah, and my God, F-Stop has 4 guys. 4 guys.
Where did they come from?
Like, I'm like, yo, Virgil, respect my man, because this guy has the entire city of Dakota behind him. Virgil gets jumped right away. It's just not even fair. Fortunately for him, Wade is coming down the street, and that inspires F-Stop to get out of there. And Wade basically goes up to Virgil and says, meet us over here at this certain time, this certain place. We're gonna talk about some things. And on his way, I love this moment.
Oh yeah.
He's on his way and he's like, Virgil is pretending to be his father, talking to himself, talking to his father as him and going back and forth. And Phil Lamar gets to go back between 2 voices. And the talent on this man is just amazing. And it's just so fun to watch. And after he has this conversation with himself, he meets up with Wade. And it turns out Wade doesn't want to talk about algebra. He wants to talk about a little something different.
Yeah, because Wade's telling him that, yo, the amount of times I have to keep having Francis stop beating up on you is cutting into my time. And it's like, all right, it's understandable. Like, you know, you got to protect your time when you can. But he tells Virgil that, like, yo, he's always appreciated him. He always thought he was cool. However, he's got to do something against Francis because if he keeps jumping in, then there's no benefit for him. So he tells him that, like, you got to join my crew, which Virgil is automatically like, no, I can't do that. Like, I already have an issue with gangs from the past, especially my dad. Just like, there's just a lot about it. So Virgil decides to walk away, but Wade still kind of gives him like the ultimatum is like, you either join my gang or you join my gang. That's it. Like that's all it's going to be. So as Virgil gets home, it's like family dinner time. His dad and his sister, they see what's going on. They know that something more is going on, but Virgil doesn't share it. So as he heads up to his room, that's when he gets a call from Richie, who this did stump me for a minute. Andrew, did you have a phone in your room at the age of 14?
Hell no. There was one phone in the house.
Right?
And if the internet was going, no, you don't get the phone at all.
Yeah. So as Virgil's on the phone with Richie, they're basically recapping everything that happened because Richie heard about Virgil being asked to join the gang. And then another call comes through and Wade's like, yo, meet me at the docks because we about to do something. Some stuff's about to go down. And that leads to Virgil finding out as he makes his way over to the docks that a gang fight is happening tonight. This could be it. This would be like whoever wins owns the block kind of fight.
And Virgil is handed a gun to go and participate in the fight. Though ironically, they don't use guns in the fight, but that's probably censorship.
That was my main issue with the fight, actually.
I assume that's because of censorship. They couldn't have teenage kids shooting guns at each other, but later they can throw fire at each other, but that's a whole other thing. But Virgil gets a gun and he immediately, no hesitation, throws it away. Says, I'm not going that far. I'm just trying to get out of here. I came here just to tell Wade I was out, and then things went south. And as this Warriors brawl is going on, the cops fly in, whole SWAT team, and one of the bold gang members shoots out one of the police lights with his gun, which is just great accuracy. Exactly. And the police decide they're going to fire back. And this moment kind of really caught me off guard because I remembered the gas being released and everything part of this, but I didn't remember that the police really escalated and they're the catalyst behind this. And I mean, that's bold commentary for a show of that era to even suggest that idea of the police making a situation worse. I was really stunned. I was not expecting to see it. And the police do indeed make the situation worse because they release a bunch of gas that starts immediately mutating all the gang members on the harbor, and including Virgil, who barely gets out of the gate before being overwhelmed by the gas.
So we jump to our next day now. Virgil wakes up because we see it, but he doesn't realize it. But there are some like purple lightning bolts just traveling around him. Automatically, we just know that Virgil has been mutated by this gas. We don't know in any way, shape, or form what it was, but he does have some issues getting out of bed as his blanket starts acting like Doctor Strange's cape. And as Virgil is just trying to think, it's just like, oh, it's just like the static electricity I was dealing with yesterday, which is really, in hindsight, was like a really great nod to a foreshadowing of just what's to come. But as Virgil heads into the bathroom, that's when his powers really start to activate. The light turns on by itself. The electric shaver that he was just using yesterday, which clearly shows that he does not know anything about shaving, being 15 years old, because I don't think anybody would be growing that much hair back already. It starts turning on by itself. And in that moment, we just see all the electricity pouring out of him as he's just astonished by the fact that, like, yo, he's a human fuse box right now. So normally, most people will probably be freaking out and trying to figure out what's going on. Virgil is just enjoying his powers. And the first thing he does is calls his homeboy Richie to meet him at the auto junkyard to show off everything that he can do.
Yeah, and this is really the most realistic thing a teenager would do. They just got superpowers. He's just throwing cars around a junkyard, having a grand old time. You could see that he can levitate off of, if he's attached to something with a metal surface, throw pieces of metal at will. And he is incredibly strong. Thank God he didn't decide to be evil, because the city would be in trouble. And Richie is again like, let's go. This is amazing. He's 100% for it. They start putting together superhero costumes right away, including, I know you caught this one, but at one point, Virgil puts on a Black Lightning costume. And oh man, that is so great. So great that they were able to put that joke in there. Then the episode comes full circle. We see Virgil going back to that warehouse where he has subdued these thieves. He left them on the roof, but unlike certain people, Batman, who leaves criminals at high places and doesn't get them down for police, Static helpfully drops them down onto the ground after he's done. Thank you, Virgil.
Yes. So while Static is seeing everything going down, he sees, as well as the criminals going down, he sees that he's sitting next to some computers for their school. So he uses his powers to take all the computers over to the school now, where everybody is there. They're decorating for homecoming. There's a great 90s joke in there about Frida, who is just like wondering where Virgil is, and Richie's way of covering for him, telling him to he had to go get his VCR fixed. Like, you know, when that 12 o'clock keeps flashing on your screen, that means something's wrong with it. Now it's just like, damn, this really brought me back. But now Static has flown in with the computers and everything, and it's just such a great scene because he's just introducing himself. He's like, my name's Static. I put a shock to your system. He's flirting with Frida. People are loving it. He's decorating. He's cracking the jokes. And the one thing that I loved about this scene was that it didn't just end with him flying off, like, happy with himself. There's this one moment in which he pauses and sees everything that he's done and all the love that he's receiving, especially just the fact that he was talking to Frida, and he's like, why is it not this easy for Virgil? And that's such a great moment because now it's clear that it's just like he has this dual identity and he sees the benefits of both, but he's realizing how much easier things are for him when he's just like this masked individual. Like he's able to say these things a lot better. He's able to do things and put himself out there a bit more, which is just so great to see because it's something that I feel like, especially growing up, and I'm especially sure it is now, that we tackle with a lot. Like, what is our identity? What identity do we put forth? Because is something going to be easier for one group of people than this? It's basically a little bit like code switching as a superhero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree that it was nice to see that it didn't instantly solve his problems getting the powers. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's now created a whole new host of problems for him to deal with. And after having this easy debut as a hero, he gets an easy win over some criminals. Now it's time for him to face something a little bit more his level. And that's the main crux of the second episode. Now in the second episode, it is clear they're all metahumans are everywhere. They're saying hundreds of people were exposed to this gas, and most of them were not the most reputable characters, as we're told. So that has instantly sets up the series for an endless amount of villains. Mm-hmm. And one of those villains is our boy F-Stop, Francis. Unfortunately, he got the superpower lottery and now has seemingly limitless fire powers. Mm-hmm. And immediately after he breaks out, he decides to just go murder Virgil. Straight up, he was ready to burn this boy to a crisp on sight.
We don't mean to laugh, but it's just like, see, this is exactly why certain people should not have superpowers.
It's crazy that he was just ready to do it. Fortunately, Virgil is able to transform into his superhero identity in time to face Hotstreak. But in a surprising twist of events, Virgil chokes.
Yeah.
He's ahead of the game. He's got Hotstreak on the rope, but he just can't take him down. And even Richie questions what's going on. And Virgil, really sad, just goes, I choked. I can't believe it. This was easy and I couldn't do it. And again, it's continuing on with his questions of identity and the dual identity, just showing that he still has some trauma. Like, it doesn't go away just because he has powers. He still has that fear inside of him. And that fear is also reflected in his father, who is at the city council meeting asking real questions to the mayor, like, yo, mayor, there's 100 superpowered kids running around. What are you about to do about it? What's your plan? And the mayor is kind of dodging his questions. And Virgil, luckily, he's going to go get some answers.
Along with the fact of him dealing with these newfound powers and what does it mean? He's like trying to figure out, will my powers be growing? So there's a nice little B plot that happens here as Virgil heads on over to the doctor. And during this time, he and the doctor are talking about the changes in his body. Now, remember, Virgil's a 14-year-old boy at this time. So the doctor is just automatically chalking this up to puberty and everything. Virgil's trying to put forward the ideas like, hey, I kind of got superpowers, and it's, but doesn't want to exactly say it. But he does mention that, like, his newfound things are happening to his body are connected to a lot of people, which is a really great little adult joke here as the doctor questions, does your father know what you've been doing? So once they get everything cleared up, fortunately, Virgil leaves the blood sample, and now he's only got to deal with, clearly now the mayor is up to no good, as well as trying to figure out, like, is there anything different about his blood? So while at the park, the mayor, which is very, again, just very old school spy kind of 90s kind of feel, the mayor heads over to a duck pond to go feed the ducks as she has a secret meeting with Edwin Alva, who, according to Richie, makes Bill Gates look broke. the two of them are talking, and it's clear that, according to Edwin Alva, that the mayor is about to cave. She's no longer cool with accepting the money that Edwin Alva has been dropping towards her. So he calls his henchmen and his goons to tell him that delete all the evidence connecting us to the mutagenic gas that was at the storage unit. And also, we definitely want to keep this work going. So delete it, but put it on a separate file. So now it's up to Static to jump in, and instead of just going out there beating up bang babies, as they're now being called, he decides to head on over to Alva Industries to get the disc so that he can prove and release it, showing that Edwin Alva is responsible for the bang baby and the Big Bang crisis that's happened in Dakota. Unfortunately, this leads to Static fighting off against probably was like Edwin Alva's top goon, because this dude is ridiculously jacked for no reason to be like the right-hand man.
Oh, you guys thought the jacked was going to end with movies? Hell no. Everyone's jacked in the DC universe. This jacked henchman captures Static in a glass case and ends up filling it with the kind of gas that looks like it'll kill you, just straight up kill you. And here's a really good demonstration of who Static is as a hero, because instead of forcing his way out with pure muscle, he thinks, well, there's pressure. The gas is building up pressure. So if I increase the pressure with my powers, then theoretically the glass will break. And it does. And he's able to get free and with the evidence. So now you're going to see that he's not always going to brute force his way out of things. He's going to really sit down and think and apply scientific concepts, which is amazing to see. There are comparisons to Spider-Man for a reason, because he's a young hero that is wise beyond his years and really knows how to apply scientific concepts to use them in battle. Because you give a normal person Spider-Man or Static's powers, most likely they're not going to do much. But you put it in the hands of a genius, and it's a game changer.
Long story short, parents, let your kids watch cartoons. There's some educational ass shit in there. Now we get another cutscene. Francis is broken out of the hospital where he was being held at. He's attacking people in the park. And as
throwing hot dogs like a savage.
Yo, like that was just the amount of wasted hot dogs this man done did. So as this attack is going down, Richie and Virgil happen to be walking along the same path. Now Virgil's running away because he's going to go suit up. But even as he's suiting up, he's expressing that yes, he still has this fear about tackling up against Francis. But if he's not there to do it, there's nobody else to do it. So he has to go. And in a great moment, which I loved, Richie's running alongside him as Static is in full gear flying away. He's just telling him that, yo, remember, you're not only Virgil anymore, you're also Static. So you got to remember, you got to think like Static. You got to be like Static. F-Stop does not have any power over Static. He may have taken out Virgil, but Static is who you are right now. So Static is who's going to take out Hot Streak. And man, I got to say, Richie's a ride or die, son. Like,
yes,
he needs to be in every person's corner because he was just dropping the most inspirational. He's like up there right now with like Optimus Prime and Captain America, in my opinion.
Yeah, Richie is it's such a great conversation. I love just Virgil when Richie's going, you got to wait for the firemen, and come on, you don't have to do it. And Virgil just goes, I got to. That's it. There's no other debate about this. He just runs into battle. And during the fight, I don't know why Virgil carried the disc with all the evidence with him.
Yeah,
he did.
Yeah.
And it gets burned up.
Not a good move, bro.
Why did you do this? Leave it with Richie.
Right.
So it gets burned up, and this causes Static to go Super Saiyan. And
yes,
he embraces his full, gets his full electric potential. And he's facing us with Hot Streak in the middle of the park, and Hot Streak's like, well, you're finished, bro, because there's no metal around here. Your powers primarily work on metal. And Static is like, dude, we're in the city. There's metal everywhere. Pulls up a pipe, sprays Hot Streak with sewage in one of the smartest yet most disgusting defeats we've ever seen on a children's TV show. And Static claims victory. The only question I have is, Static, are you going to put that main sewage line back? Because that looks like it's going to take a lot of hours to fix.
Word. I was wondering the same thing because I was just like, you could have just brought it back down. You could have definitely fixed that up in like 2 seconds compared to the taxpayer dollars that's going to go into that now. We don't know what's going to happen to the mayor because, you know, we obviously know that there's some corruption going on. So as they're now at home, Virgil and Richie are up in their room reading some comics. They're having another great conversation here. And which, again, parents, let your kids watch cartoons because Virgil's talking about the Roman king Pyrrhus, who during this battle lost so many men. Even though that he won, was it truly a victory? And that is the definition of a Pyrrhic victory. So as they're having this conversation, Virgil gets a call from Dr. Harris, who tells him that his electrolytes are high. And he's like freaking out because he's just like, yo, I don't know anything about electricity in the body. Why would I know why my electrolytes are high? And Dr. Harris explains to him that it really only means, bro, that you need to stop eating so many salty foods, which I'm not going to lie, that kind of hurt me a little bit because I felt a little targeted there.
Yeah. They almost looked at the screen like, yo, eat a vegetable. that's they're coming for your whole neck.
So that is how our kind of like intro episodes of Static end here with episode 2. And so we jump into episode 3, which kind of gives us some more time to just experience who Static is in the more everyday scenario.
At this point, we're getting into the more serialized stuff. So it's not going to be too heavy on a story as the first 2, but there's still some fun stuff in here. So the main focus of this episode is there's an athlete around who everyone loves. He's the most popular kid in school. And against all odds, he comes to Virgil to get tutored. And while they're hanging out, they're getting tutored. Everyone's trying to spend more time with the popular kid while Virgil's tutoring him. The athlete's just like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta go right now. And he's having stomach aches. And once he gets on the bus, he transforms into this plasma-like creature that just can't really control anything that he's doing. And as he is trying to get a handle of his powers, Ebon, the best, in my opinion, the best villain in Static Shock, a villain who has these shadow powers that allow him to travel basically wherever he needs to go, climb up walls as a shadow, and who is always just so smart and savvy. He picks up the athlete and says, hey, I got a proposition for you.
As they're talking, Ebon's telling him that, hey, you know, you're clearly one of us now. Like, I'm trying to gather up some metahumans from my own gang. I'm trying to take over now. Like, it's clear that the age of Francis and Wade, of them running the streets, is over. Ebon's coming in, trying to take over. So he tells him that, like, by joining me, I can make sure you have some food, some home, and some money. Because right now, those are the essentials that it looks like you're missing. Because you can't go back home. Ain't nobody going to love you, and ain't nobody going to appreciate you, and nobody going to respect you because of the way you look. So as they're talking, we cut to a scene where we're adding a little bit to the Static mythos here, as Static gets his new device, the Static Saucer, which Richie has created, which, again, these are like 14-year-old kids, so I have no idea how the hell you thought of this, because it is a portable and foldable flying disc that Static can use, that he can ride on by sending an electrical charge through it, because it is a mylar alloy. I never had this kind of thought process at even 21. Where the hell did this come from?
We have to assume that, like, there's a Star Labs offshoot somewhere in this universe, and Richie just, like, really likes reading the articles that Star Lab Uberthon comes up with some great. I mean, Harrison Wells comes up with some
Right.
great, great articles that are really engaging to young folk. But it is an iconic part of his character, the foldable sphere. So it's great to see it introduced so early on. And as he's floating around on his new ride, Ebon decides to send I forget everyone's names, but I'm gonna say
Oh, yeah.
Evil Hawk Girl and Light Blade McGee to
I like it. I like it.
but he sends them after Static and they go into a brief fight and Ebon eventually gets Static and says, look, yo, we could have messed you up, really, but don't worry about it. All we really wanted to do was recruit you, and we knew, we couldn't just come straight up talk to you. So we just wanted to recruit you for our gang. And Static's like, no, thank you. And what I like about this is back in those days, animation was more focused on being serialized. You could jump into any episode with a loose understanding of the continuity, but it really wasn't focused on building up things. But here, you go back to episode 1, you know why he's not joining any gangs, why he's not even questioning it. So I like that this is a natural, makes complete sense. He's not even going to question like joining a gang again. It's a wrap. It's a no for him, dog.
So as Static leaves, or gets rather pushed out by Ebon, he's walking and talking with Richie now. Virgil's talking with Richie as they start heading over to where Derek's home is at, because he's been missing for the past couple of days. He's missing from their tutoring sessions from school. And as they get to the home, Derek's mom opens the door and she tells him that he hasn't been home either. Now, back at the hideout where the breed is at, Derek is trying to transform himself back into his regular self, but it's not happening as Ebon's pushing once again to be like, hey, you're here with us now, so you don't need to worry about your old self. So they start heading over to a sports center, or like kind of like a Modell's or a Dick's Sporting Goods store. And they're attacking an armored truck, which also I was shocked to see. I never knew that armored truck stopped by sporting goods stores.
Hey, man, they were moving those baseballs in that town.
So as the breed takes out the armored truck, Static comes through, and at one point he hears Ebon or one of the other people called Destruct by his real name, Derek. So at that moment, Static puts 2 and 2 together, realizes that Destruct is actually Derek that's been influenced by everything dealing with the Big Bang. And as Destruct is able to push Static out the way into what seems like his death, Static heads back home. He talks with Richie as they're now trying to find the station that Static was first taken to when he first met up with Ebon and them. Introducing what I would like to, I think I want to do this for our season now. Count how many DC references pop up in the show.
Only the best ones will survive.
Yes, because we get the first DC reference pops up here as the train station that they were found at is at Milestone Street, connected to our Milestone Media, the origin of Static Shock, at Cohen Avenue, who's credited, Dennis Cohen is one of the creators of Static Shock. So, bam, that is your DC reference for today.
It is great. It's a great place for the final confrontation where Static is just able to get through to Derek and just say, this isn't all it has to be. And I know you got a bad deal in life. I know you're metahuman power, because they do also briefly talk about how Static, he wasn't changed by the power. Evil Hawk Girl, Ebon, and Derek, they all have all their bodies twisted by these powers. But Static is able to function as a normal human being and blend in. And that factors in to their angst and everything. But fortunately, Static is able to get through to Derek, defeat Ebon for the first of what will be many times. And Derek decides to make the incredibly bold choice of submitting himself to a hospital to be studied in the hopes of reversing his condition and maybe others.
So that ends our episode 3 as Virgil and Richie are walking away which I think is something that's going to be kind of like constant throughout the series, because I've seen it not only in this one, but also in our next episode, Grounded, as we open up to our second most Jack character, the rat that helped to open up this scene. This thing was bigger than a New York City rat, and it was never touched by any Big Bang gas. So I have no idea why it was so big.
Was it a rat or an armadillo? I couldn't tell.
Well, it was first the rat, and then we saw the armadillo pop out. But honestly, the rat scared me the most.
Oh yeah, the rat before that. Yes, okay. Master Splinter, gangster cousin.
Yes. So the armadillo, which funnily name is Carmendillo, as his actual real name, pops out the garbage. He heads over to a restaurant that's across the street and attacks this couple who's eating some food there. As Static interrupts, the two of them fight, leading into a confrontation in a lot where a building is being built. But as Carmendillo gets the upper hand over Static, as Static is knocked over, the ground starts rumbling. They're wondering, is this an earthquake? And then the scariest thing ever pops up from the ground, a giant paramecium. I think it's a paramecium.
Whoa. Can we say that on this show? But if you ever wondered what happened to the 1% of germs that you don't kill with your hand sanitizer, it turns into this. This giant amorphous blob that can just devastate these other metahumans. So right now, all they're worried about is how to stop this. And this creature seems pretty resilient. But luckily, Virgil manages to hold it off, but knows there is something really weird going on that maybe has something to do with the Big Bang or not. And because I don't know what the logic was behind this, the rest of the plot line, but Virgil's friend Frida works for the journalism club, and their budget is being cut. So they decide to go to the school at night and print out a paper illegally to insist why the journalism department should be reinstated, at the same time that Virgil will return to the school to analyze the amoeba with the science equipment. What the hell?
Simple answer. It was the 90s to 2000s. We always had to have one episode in which the kids snuck into the school, another episode in which there was some budget cuts to some kind of club that was happening. We were just fortunate to have it all happen in the same episode.
Yeah, it all comes together. And at one point, it's clear that the blob can multiply. It can divide itself. And it's not clear how they can stop it. So Virgil ends up in the ceiling. I love this, just the coincidences in this episode that Virgil ends up crawling through the ceiling vents and falling into the room where all the journalism students have been locked into. And he can't get out of there with static powers because, he doesn't want to reveal himself. So he has to wait for Richie to come, pretend to unlock the door, and while he's freeing with the static powers. So many coincidences.
Also added into the mythos here real quick too, we have another static item added to his belt. We have the shock box. This is how Richie and Static are able to keep in communication, and how he was able to tell Richie to come on over to the other side to unlock the door. While at the same time, Richie's freaking out and calling to Virgil saying like, yo, paramecium is rolling through the school and destroying everything because it's trying to come back and collect the piece that you had cut off. So you gotta do something. And as they're able to finally get out, they're cornered at the same time by the paramecium. There's a janitor who's also roaming around. He's been mopping the floors the entire day.
This man gets no breaks.
Right? It's like, pay this man some overtime. He's working harder than Alfred out here, yo. But luckily enough, by him still sticking around, the chemicals that he's using to mop the floors happen to harm the bacteria, which works out to Static's advantage because after he's able to protect everybody to get them out of the school, he's finally able to take the actual jugs of chemicals and spray them over the paramecium, shriveling it up to nothing. So I don't know what was in this thing. It's probably like a combination of Lysol and bleach. And
I don't know if they should be using this in the schools.
That was another thing too.
It looks like a little bit strong. Maybe he's been high off of the fumes all day, and that's why he hasn't noticed it's night. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know for real. I do not know why he was still there.
Yeah,
we wrap up now. He's also nowhere to be seen in the wrap up.
I think maybe he's passed out. Like, I don't know. And the episode ends on a bizarre note where a bunch of reporters show up to the school at night. I guess they followed the paramecium, and the kids are like, "Yeah, we were here to save journalism," and the kids hand out their school newspaper to all these journalists, and the journalists are like, "Yeah, let's read it." In night, what?
I think this also earns so far the most absurd Static episode.
Yes, by far. It started out with a weird armadillo man, and it ended up with the 1% of germs nearly killing everybody. So normally this would be the part where we give individual ratings, but it's a series. It's a TV series, so we're going to do something a little different. By the end of this, we're going to have the definitive ranking of every Static Shock episode. Mm-hmm. We're going to put it on a list for everybody to enjoy. And we're going to get into the full thing of that later. But just off the bat, the lightning round, out of this bunch, your favorite and your least favorite episode out of this bunch of 4.
I think we already know the least favorite. I think that was a given.
Hopefully it won't be this obvious every week.
Least favorite definitely has to go hands down to my boy, the paramecium, because when your whole episode could have been solved with a bottle of Lysol, that's not a real threat. Best episode, I have to actually give it to episode 2. I think it showed the most depth of Static. I love that little power-up scene. It was just so iconic. I remember as I was watching it, I was like, yeah, let's go. Like the theme song was playing in my head. And I was just like, that's why I love that second episode so much. How about you? Best and worst episode?
Well, the worst is obviously episode 2. No. Least favorite here. Again, I agree. Armadillo and the 1% of germs. I just couldn't get into that one. That one was a little too weird for me. And I also agree. The best was episode 2, just showing Static's smarts, how he gets out of situations with cleverness and his abilities, and a nice emotional arc for him where he really learns a lesson.
Yeah, agree. All right. So that was it for our show. And I know you're probably thinking, what? That's it, 4 episodes? Well, don't worry, because we also got a little bit of comic book for y'all. Because again, Static Shock is based off the comic book superhero Static. So today's section, we're calling it New Hero, Who Dis?
Oh, all right.
Yes, because not only did we were introduced to Static, but we're also introduced to the idea of identity here in a lot of these episodes. Like, how does he balance the being able to communicate with the people he knows as both identities? Like, how much does he has to hold back, and how much he is putting forward of himself in one identity versus the other? So, started off with a little bit of history. Static was created in 1993. It was first introduced in, I love the title already of this particular comic, in Static #1, You Don't Start None, There Won't Be None. And he was created by Dwayne McDuffie, Derek T. Dingle, Dennis Cohen, Michael Davis. They all came together back in the day, formed Milestone Media, that was published under DC Comics. And I'll talk about Milestone. Hopefully, I'd love to do like a bonus episode on Milestone Media. I think the history there is just so rich, and the characters that they help to create is just even better, especially because they're blowing up, y'all. They're coming soon to TV screens, movie theaters, everything you could think of, they'll be there. As I mentioned, Static was introduced in Static #1, and that was released in June of 1993. Virgil Hawkins was created to be, and Andrew, I'm glad you pointed this out, he was created to be the modern day Spider-Man archetype. At that time, I think it was like Spider-Man had been reaching up in years. He was an adult, probably in, I don't know, college or something like that. So Dwayne McDuffie and the rest of the Milestone Media wanted to create a hero that had that same kind of vibe. Somebody who was smart, somebody who was goofy, was able to roll with the punches literally and figuratively. And, somebody that, like, no matter what age you were, to be a kid, a teenager, a young adult, you were going to gravitate towards him because he had interests very similar to yours. His lifestyle, his upbringing is very similar to yours. And most importantly, he's Black. Like, that was the biggest thing about him. That was the thing that helped to connect us to him, because with Spider-Man, he was always been Peter Parker. He's always been the white kid living in Queens. So it's just like being, you're kind of like your nerdy kid. You gravitated towards him. But now you have Static. You have Virgil Hawkins, who's this new kid on the block who looks a lot like us. There weren't many BIPOC superheroes back in the day, and Dwayne McDuffie and Static helped to really open up that door a lot. So going into a little bit of the creation of his history, I'm going to call him out by his full name, so apologies to Virgil if he's listening out there. Virgil Ovid Hawkins. That's the boy's full name.
Damn, government name. All right. Expose him.
Yep. So his name actually originates from the Florida attorney, the Black Florida attorney, who spent the last decades of his life fighting to be able to practice law in Florida because he was denied admission to the University of Florida School of Law based off of his race. So it wasn't until after his death and a petition by numerous attorneys that he was finally able to be instated into the Florida bar. But his name is in honor of that same attorney, who was actually Virgil D. Hawkins. The Ovid comes from the fact that, which is a great little nod that they do in the comic books, is based off of two Roman names, the Virgil and Ovid, great writers, to once again show this love and appreciation for education and the arts and just overall classicism that Virgil Hawkins has exhibited in this series as a whole. So it's just like, it's really cool to have this connection that, most people probably wouldn't have realized, especially because it's just like, hey, he's like, he doesn't have like, his name is so similar to mine, but there's just strong history behind it. So finding out about this, I was like, this is pretty cool that we're able to create a hero like this. And he's not even at this point, he's Virgil Hawkins, not even like Static yet. So back now to Static himself. I'll be honest, I haven't read that many Static comics growing up. There are a total of 45 in the original run, and then there are a couple of spin-offs that they did. Some of them are a little bit of reboots, like Rebirth of Cool. Some of them are like newer ones that popped up in New 52. And now they've been really kind of introducing them more. But these original ones where the show is based off of, they're a little bit difficult to find, in my opinion. Like, do you remember seeing a Static comic growing up, Andrew, or at least them popping up anywhere?
I couldn't say I did. Like, I think I was lucky enough to find an anthology of sorts at a book fair once. I still have that copy because it's so hard to come by. And yeah, I think part of it was accessibility, that really the easiest way to find Static was to catch a rerun or if you're our age, you catch it live on WB. So it was harder, and there are definitely barriers and things in the way, but yeah, it was hard to find a Static comic to just read and learn about the character.
You're right, because like some of these comics are just like hard to find. Like I was able to find one at like a local bookstore in a town completely outside of even where I live, like in a whole other state. So as soon as I saw it, I had to buy it. But right now, the lowest asking price for Static #1 is $75. So when you think about that comic dropping in 1993, it was probably most of those times they were probably just under $1, a little over $1. The highest amount that I've seen so far is 300.
Ooh.
So it's going to be a little difficult to find some static comics. Fortunately, quick shout out to DC Universe Infinite that has now transitioned over into a complete digital comic book site. They've been dropping the static comics there, old ones and new ones. So that right now, I'm hoping that, people out there, listeners out there will join me on this journey as I'm now diving into reading these static comics because they're great. And just overall, like, to be real, those stories are relevant as fuck. Like, it's crazy how, as you mentioned, just seeing that scene of how the police were able to have some kind of involvement in everything that happened, it escalated it. That's something that gets echoed out throughout all the different iterations of static that I've seen so far. And they're going to become even more relevant because, Michael B. Jordan's producing the live action static film, where we just secured the writers for those. There's, as announced at DC Fandoms, is an animated crossover film with the entire Milestone Dakotaverse coming. And already there have been several new comics of Static and other Milestone characters dropping right now. I think Static's dropped his at least third issue of comics right now in the newer run. But each one introduces us to Virgil, this 14 to 15-year-old kid from Dakota who's much like us. He's very much in the comics, very much in the video games, likes to rap in front of the mirror. He doesn't have to shave as much as we do, but but he's always been this kind of cool kid. And even in the original comics from 1993, we get the same group of characters that we see here. Wade makes an appearance. He actually has a bit more of a presence in the comics than he does in the show. He isn't just a one episode person and gone. To be honest, I've always had a theory that maybe Wade was Ebon. Okay. I've always wanted to figure that out. So Wade is a friend of Static as well. He kind of takes on the identity and the personalities of a little bit of Wade in that first comic, and then also Derek in the third episode. I mean, because the reason why the two of them bond is Virgil ended up tutoring Larry, whose name is Larry Wade. So that's how they became friends. Richie is also in it, but he actually goes more by Richard or Rick. And I haven't gotten to a point where the two of them are as close as they are in the TV show. Maybe it's something that pops up later on in the series, but as of right now, they're pretty much just happen to be in the same friend group, but don't really communicate with each other. And last but not least, Frida. She is a big part of the comic book series. She actually takes on the role of Richie in the comics. Static or Virgil has a thing for Frida, always has ever since they met each other. They talk on the phone daily, in fact, but she doesn't know, I think, that Virgil likes her the way that he does. So once he becomes Static, he gets a little bit more confident in his approach, and is at that point where he actually actively starts to hit on Frida, while both as Virgil and as Static. But after the events of, very similar to our second episode, which Static or Virgil does have a disagreement with, who's not called Francis in the comics, at least on that slip I've seen. He's called B Money B or Biz Money B. This is Hot Streak's real name.
Terrible.
So they get into a similar altercation as they do in the first episode and the second episode. And the comic does read a lot, kind of like how I did it in the show, where it's Virgil tells the story of his origin as a flashback. But this time he tells the story to Frida, because after getting beat up by Hot Streak, this is when Frida unmasked him and she sees that Virgil is actually Static. And this is when he reveals everything to her, his feelings for her, his origin, why he lost against Hot Streak, because at the time of when Static got his powers, very similarly to being told that he needs to join this gang, or, he has to shoot F-Stop in order to, or beat Biz Money B in order to protect himself. This is when the Big Bang does happen. And he's assuming that Hot Streak is dead, but this is why it's such a bigger surprise in the comic, which really echoed well in the shows. The last thing that does happen that I do want to bring up is there is a bit of a big change in which Virgil handled the gun situation. The gun is a gift from Wade, same way it was in the show. But this time, Virgil sits on the gun a little bit longer than he does. He doesn't get it at the docks. He gets it well beforehand. He's having this internal battle with himself of, do I use this? And there's scenes in which really well-drawn scenes, and it looks like he's pointing the gun at F-Stop or Hot Streak. It's just going to get too confused if I keep going between the comic book name and the show name. It looks like he's pointing the gun at Hot Streak, but this is when he's just like, I could do it. I could pull this trigger. I could end this all right now. However, I'm not a killer. And that's when he throws the gun into the lake or the river. So I can see why they had dialed it down in the TV show, because it is, again, marketed to kids. The comic is much more adult. There's a lot more scenes that, like during our time period, you might be taken aback from it. But at that time, I can understand why they were written like this, because these are stories about communities that we grew up in or communities that are very similar to ours. So it's like reading a lot of this stuff, I was just like, yeah, I've probably seen something like this happen, or I've been involved in something like this. So I'm glad that Milestone created this story and this character, because again, they did such a great job in creating a character that we can connect with no matter how old we are. So that was Static's history overall. The other big change, before I completely close off, Virgil's mother is still alive in the comics. That's something that I'm at a point now too. I don't know if this is going to change in the future. Again, I hope that people out there will join on this journey as we read through DC Universe's access to the Static comics that are out there. But having this kind of change really does change the game on how he communicates and how I see the communication between his father in the show and his mother in the comic books, because they both do a very similar style of presence in their lives. But his mother is definitely much more crass with like being like, yo, you can't be fucking up like this. You know who we are. You not see the color of our skin. We can't be doing that. But yeah, I love this comic so far. I'm very happy to continue reading it because it does give me a much more adult style of Static that hopefully maybe in the live action or other stories that we're going to be seeing more of. So very happy to continue on this journey, and especially with our series here as we are running through the entire 52 episodes that make up the Static Shock series.
Yep. So for a pop every time, we're going to come back. We can't promise they're going to be armadillos throughout the whole run, but we'll bring a lot more fun as we cover this landmark series that just is so influential and so important to us growing up. And it's fun to talk about it here.
Yeah. Until next time, just keep on watching. Again, the entire Static Shock series is available on HBO Max. If you have it, you can stream it there. The comics are available on DC Universe, or you can head on over to your local comic book shop if you're lucky enough to find one there. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and, follow Virgil's motto and don't join any gang violence.
And do not mess around with that 1% of germs.
Now that we've finished talking about our DC animated content, here are some recommended readings for you. All of these comics and more can be found at your local comic shop, so remember to venture out and support your part of the source wall. And tell them Andrew and Shamar sent you. First comic on our list is Static. These comics from 1993 created by Milestone Media serve as the origin of Static in our series source material. Next we have Static Season 1. This ongoing 2021 comic by Vita Ayala and Criss Cross gives us a modern retelling of Static's early years and includes characters that we saw in the TV series. The one thing that is missing though is how he got his powers, which you can find in Milestone Returns number 0. In February of 2021, we saw the release of this one-shot comic featuring art by Milestone co-founder Dennis Cowan. This comic brings back all the heroes of the Milestone universe, including Static. Virgil gets his powers during the Big Bang, but this time it is during the release of an experimental tear gas used at a march for Black Lives Matter. Again, the thing we love about comics and stories like these is that social commentary. That's all for our list. Thank you for listening, and be sure to rate, review, and follow yet another DC animated podcast. Also, interact with us on social media for news on upcoming content. Take care, and we'll see you for the next issue.